Well, if I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, my name is Rick. I get to be the lead pastor here at Autumn Ridge. So glad you're here today. I want to welcome those of you who are watching online. When I was in college, I was hanging out with a group of friends late one night. We were just joking around, and I said to a girl that I went to school with, any stop sign that has a white border around it, it's actually a yield sign, and you don't have to stop. 2 weeks later, her roommate attacked me as I was walking across the quad to tell me that girl had been running stop signs for 2 weeks. Now, fortunately, she never got in an accident. She didn't get hurt, and nobody got hurt. I have kind of a dry, sarcastic sense of humor. I did not think she was going to take me that seriously. For the record, all the stop signs have a white border around them. And the way to tell the difference between a stop sign and a yield sign says yield. Now, when I tell that story, there's a word that might come to mind, and that word is gullible. And most Bible translations don't use the word gullible. Some do. But most of them use words that are very similar. Words like naive or words like simple. I'm curious, have you ever read this verse before? Proverbs 14:15 says, "The simple believe anything, but the prudent," or the wise person, "they give thoughts to their steps." And so how should we think about what this means right here? What does it mean to be simple? What does it mean to be simple-minded? I want to share with you a definition today. If you were to read all of the book of Proverbs, I think this is the definition we might walk away with. It's lacking the necessary life experience to connect the dots between today's choices and tomorrow's experiences. You just lack the necessary life experience to be able to put those two things together. And here's the deal. In life, we all start off here. We all start off lacking life experience. We all start here, but we don't have to stay here. And if you were to find that, you know what, this is a description of you, that you don't have the necessary life experiences, you haven't learned yet how to connect the dots between choices today and what you experience tomorrow, you should not feel badly about that. You certainly shouldn't feel badly about yourself. You know what you should feel? You should feel motivated to graduate to wisdom. But here's the problem with wisdom. We don't come by wisdom accidentally. No one accidentally graduates to wisdom. No one drifts into wisdom. Becoming wise takes work. Every single one of us, we start right here, but if we don't intentionally, on purpose, pursue wisdom, we will accidentally graduate to something else. I went to grad school in the city of New Orleans. That's where I went to seminary. And if you are married while in grad school, that means you are poor. And I was married, and so we were poor. And we needed cheap dates and fun dates. And there's a place just off of Jackson Square in the French Quarter where you can walk along the Mississippi River. And one night, Heather and I were enjoying this free and somewhat romantic date, just walking along the Mississippi River, brand new to the city of New Orleans. And a guy walks up to us and says, "I bet you $5 I could tell you where you got your shoes." Let me tell you what a nerd I am. I was thinking to myself, God is past tense of get. There's no way that he can tell me where in the past I acquired my footwear. So I just said to the guy, "You can't tell me where I got my shoes." And if you've ever been to New Orleans, you know exactly what he said next. He said, "Got them on your feet." Busted, and I look like an idiot. And now I have to pay this guy $5 to leave us alone. There is a verse that I think describes me that night. Proverbs 18:2, "Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions." And I thought to myself, this guy can't get one over on me. I know everything that I need to know, and my problem was worse than being gullible or naive or simple. I was a bit cocky, and I had graduated to foolishness. And here's the trouble with being foolish. And what I'm going to say next it might sound counterintuitive to some of us, but it doesn't change the fact that it's true. Being foolish has nothing to do with how smart you are. Being foolish has nothing to do, absolutely zero to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with attitude. If you are relatively new to the Bible, what I'm going to say next might be new to you. If you know the Bible, if you're familiar with it, what I'm going to say next probably should not be a surprise to you. Over and over and over again throughout the New Testament, followers of Jesus are instructed to spot the difference and know the difference between foolishness and wisdom. The expectation of those of us who follow Jesus is that we will put in the work to be wise and to grow in wisdom. But Jesus knew that this was going to be hard for us. He knew we'd be on the struggle bus when it came to wisdom. He knew that we would constantly be hounded by and vulnerable to simple-mindedness and even foolish thinking. And that's why Jesus said this. He said, I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. This morning, I just don't have the time to unpack the full conversation in which Jesus made this sentence. This statement. I would encourage you to go and read Matthew chapter 10 sometime this week, maybe even today. Let me give you the backstory. Jesus, he was sending out his 12 closest guys on assignment. They were doing a short-term missions trip, so to speak. And he was trying to give them crystal clear instructions and crystal clear expectations. And the thing that he wanted them to know is that there are going to be people who are unkind to you. There are going to be people who are hostile and aggressive to you as you go out. And what he was trying to make clear to them, I think, is the same thing that he wants to make clear to us. It's not enough just to go out and go forward with good intentions. You have to go forward with insight. You have to go forward with strategic thinking. You have to be shrewd. You have to know the difference between intent and impact, and you have to know how to close the gap. You have to know how to make your impact line up with your good intentions. And what Jesus, I believe, was trying to say to those guys that day is the same thing that he would want us to get today, and that's this. Compassion is not a substitute for wisdom. We need both. Jesus commands both. And to be a fully devoted follower of Jesus means that we will be devoted to compassion and to wisdom. To take the leadership of Jesus seriously in our lives means that we will take seriously the need for compassion and the need for wisdom. We're joining with many other churches around the country today that are making a big deal out of adoption. We've opted to expand it to adoption and foster weekend. And you know that these kites up here have something to do with it. What do these kites represent? These kites represent 1% of the kids in our state who are in the foster care system. Have you multiplied these kites by 100? You'll get the number of kids who are approximately in the foster care system in the state of Minnesota. It's somewhere over 16,000 kids. And these kites also come very close to representing the number of kids in our community, in our county, who are in the foster care system. It's a number that fluctuates, but right now it's somewhere over 130. I want to ask you this question. What would it mean to you personally? And what would it mean to us collectively if we were able to do something about it? If we were able to bring meaningful hope and meaningful care to kids who need it? Sprinting towards people with big and messy needs, being generous with kindness and sacrificial with our support. That is the kind of stuff that has defined followers of Jesus from day one. It's why we read things like this in the New Testament. James chapter 1 says this. Religion, and let's not get hung up on this word, it means the outward expression of what you believe. It's a synonym in the way that it's used in Greek for worship. So we could even say religion or worship that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless as this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. This verse right here is a mandate, it's a command, it is a call to put compassion in action. It's not necessarily a mandate to adopt. It could include that, but it doesn't necessarily include that. Adoption is one way to express care. It's not the only way to express care, and I think it's not even the highest way to express care. I don't want you to mishear me. I'm not down on adoption. My wife and I, we've been foster parents and we have adopted. I've met many people in our church this weekend who they're adults now, who have been adopted. We are pro-adoption. I want you to be pro-adoption. But if you sense a tiny bit of hesitancy, it's related to this. In the past 20 years, there's been a major adoption movement in the evangelical church world, and that's a good thing. That's a great thing. But sometimes that movement got a little disconnected from wisdom and the way that Jesus commanded us to have wisdom. And so as we look at this verse, worship or religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after. And this word right here, in Greek, it's actually one word. It's the same word that we get the word pastor from, in the verb sense, to care for, to shepherd, to look out for, to look after. If we want to take that seriously, we need to take it seriously with wisdom. And what is on the line for us? What's the cost if we move forward lacking wisdom? I got 3 things for us to think about. If we lack wisdom, false guilt will push some to undercommit. If we adopt a way of thinking that says the only way to live out this verse is to adopt, what about all those people who are not in a position where they can adopt? Well, they're going to feel like they're not good enough Christians, that their worship isn't acceptable, that they're not good enough, and that's a problem. And if that's what we think, the only way to apply this verse is to adopt, and we can, and we feel guilty about that, that's really false guilt because it's a misunderstanding, and we might miss out on the many ways that there are available to us to care for kids and to care for those who are caring for kids. If we lack wisdom, false guilt will push some to overcommit. If we adopt a way of thinking that says the only way to fulfill this verse is to adopt, then good-hearted people with really good intentions who might not be up for the task of adoption are going to do it anyway because they think that that's what's required of them. It's compassion without wisdom. And that always comes with a very costly price tag. If we lack wisdom, we can cause hurt instead of comforting hurt, and none of us want to do that. If we underinvest and undercommit and underengage, we can accidentally contribute to this. If we overcommit and we're not ready, we can accidentally do this when really our goal is to provide comfort to those who are hurting and to those who are in need. Verses like James 1:27 and many others throughout the New Testament have led us as a church to adopt this as one of our guiding values. It's to move towards the messes. Nobody makes a difference by staying comfortable. There are big needs and maybe even messy needs that I think that we can do something about. And so today, my wife and I want to share with you our story. I'm going to invite my wife, Heather, to the stage. For those of you who've never met her, this is my wife. We've been married for almost 22 years, a couple of months more. It'll be 22 years. And we want to share with you our story. We started off with lots of good intentions, but low on wisdom, high on simple-mindedness. True?
True.
I don't know if anybody ever told us compassion is no substitute for wisdom. If either they didn't tell us or we were bad listeners.
I think we were bad listeners.
It could be that we were bad listeners. But we want to tell you our story for 2 reasons. Number one, we want to inspire you to take James 1:27 seriously and to take your next step into providing meaningful care and love and support to kids in needs. And we also want to inspire you to not be like us and to move forward with wisdom instead of simple-mindedness. So I want to show you a picture. This is our daughter who moved into our house when she was 17. We adopted her when she was 18. This was obviously a bit ago. This is Caroline. She's getting ready to graduate high school now, and that's our son, Jack. And believe it or not, as strange as it may sound, we met our daughter on Facebook. Did you know you could do that? Be careful who you friend. And so I got a message one day. I just got a message one day from a kid that I had never met before. At this time in my life, I was a youth pastor. She sort of knew a kid who was in the church where I was a youth pastor at, and she just messaged me and said, "Who is God?" And so I wrote her back a thoughtful answer, somewhat of a playful answer, trying to keep the conversation going because I didn't know who she was. What I did not know was the night that she sent me that message, "Who is God?" She was at her boyfriend's house, and they had just gotten back from her boyfriend's sister's funeral. And her boyfriend's sister, who had just died, was her best friend, and she died by suicide. And that night, everyone in the house, including mom and dad, were all drunk and high on Oxycontin, just trying to numb the pain. And when she sent me this message, this was her Hail Mary attempt. It was her last-ditch effort to try to, if God existed, to step into her life because she was seriously considering suicide herself. I didn't know any of that. I found out much, much later. And so I responded to her message. She responded back, and she started coming to a small group that we had in our house for high school students. And so, Heather, I just want to ask you this question. How did we go from being small group leaders of a hurting teenager to becoming her mom and dad?
Yeah, that seems like a really big jump. And this story actually starts a little farther back than when we first met Rochelle. What you need to know, first of all, is that Rick and I decided that we were done having our own children after we had 2 of our own. Mm-hmm. I'm not a great pregnant person.
Or a nice one.
Or a nice one. Thank you. Oh, man. But we did feel like God was moving us to be open to the idea of adopting one day. And we thought that, like several of our friends would probably adopt a baby from a foreign country, someone small. Yeah. We never in 1,000 years thought that we would be entering into an adoption scenario with a teenager. At that point. So that's setting the stage. Also, we're telling you this story not to pat ourselves on the back, but so that you can see how God used a couple of ignorant people for his greater purpose. And I'm grateful that he's bigger than we are.
Yeah.
Bigger than us.
So we found out a little bit about her story.
We did. She started coming to our house. As we got to know her a little more, Rick brought me in really quickly into that conversation. And so I started to get to know her. I'd invite her over. She'd babysit the kids sometimes. And we really started to unpack the layers of this story of Rochelle and her life in foster care. And it was horrible.
Yeah, I was thinking horrific, yeah.
Horrible.
And we met people, adults in her life who knew her, who could corroborate the story too.
We did. Neighbors would come to us and say, we're so glad that you're in her life because this is truly a terrible situation for her.
So we got foster certified.
We did.
So that she could come in and be in our home, and which is what we did. Now I said that we started off naive. On a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rank us on simple-mindedness, naive, or even foolish?
Like 11.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever
11.
10 was, we were 10 and maybe past it.
Right.
Yeah. We had no clue what we were getting into.
We really didn't. We thought, if we give this broken, hurting girl everything she needs to succeed in life, she will be grateful and she will thrive and be launched into adulthood without any problems.
I thought she's gonna love it. She's gonna be so grateful. We're gonna give her a home and a puppy, and everything will be great. And you laugh, but that's not a joke. I thought that. Right? And so we were a bit naive.
We were.
Okay, but in God's grace, his graciousness exceeded our wisdom deficit. Okay. We don't want to be naive. We don't want to be simple-minded. We don't want to be foolish. But were there any benefits? Like, did God do anything?
I think so.
Did he make it an advantage for us?
I think for us, it allowed us to jump into a situation where if we had had all the information up front, we probably would have been a lot more hesitant to do it.
I would have chickened out.
Probably.
Yeah, I don't think I would have been brave enough to step into it knowing all that I know now.
Right.
But we've been talking about this. We've had this conversation many times. Knowing all that we know now, would we do it all over again?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But we would want to do it with more wisdom.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so let me ask you this question. Had we had more wisdom, what would we have done differently?
I think something that would have been different for me at the beginning was having more conversations with people who are already in foster care and understanding what it really means. We had a very limited, very narrow view of what foster care was, and because we were young and we thought we knew everything, we didn't really think we needed that help. But I think that would have helped us to understand the gravity of the situation that we were bringing in, also help us understand, the risks for our other 2 kids.
Yeah, we were clueless on what it meant for them as we were on this journey. We waited to engage until we could buy our first house. We had just purchased our first house, and as I look back on that, when we were early in the stages, we went and talked to your parents. We talked to other people who had purchased homes, and we were trying to educate ourselves on that process. We didn't talk to one foster family before we jumped into this.
We didn't. We've been in ministry together longer than we've been married. And so we've been doing student ministry. We felt like we pretty much had a handle on teenagers. We had this.
We had missed the memo on compassion is not a substitute for wisdom.
Yes.
And here's I think one of the sneaky and nasty price tags of simple-mindedness or foolishness is that it demotivates you from preparation. And we didn't do anything really to prepare. And it would have been to Rochelle's benefit, to our kids' benefit, and to our benefit had we done that.
Yeah.
And one of the things you've talked about is we would have set up a support system for ourselves.
Yeah.
We would have gotten other people on our team to be in it with us and not just us by ourselves. And so we want to strongly encourage, because we think some of you ought to probably move towards this, and it's a wonderful thing,
Yeah.
but to do so with wisdom.
Yep.
All right, so we probably ought to hit the pause button because the story takes an interesting turn. We took on a 3-month-old baby about 2 weeks after Rochelle came into our house. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we became certified foster parents with the sole intention of just bringing Rochelle into our house. We weren't really interested in the rest of it, but we did get a call one night about 2 weeks after Rochelle moved in from the Child Protective Services saying they'd just done a drug raid and they found this baby whose parents were high and completely checked out, and she needed immediate placement. So, of course, they're like, it was for 24 hours.
Yeah, they call us, just 24 hours. 6 months later, we still we got this little baby with us.
So we brought in this baby. So we went from 2 kids and 1 dog to 4 kids and 2 dogs within a matter of weeks.
Every night, every dinner was like a birthday party. It was chaos. It was fun. I want to ask you to talk about this. We lived in a great small town that had outdoor festivals and stuff.
Yeah.
And so we would all walk through downtown together, and people got a little judgy.
Right. They did get judgy. And here's why. Because the baby, Kylie, looks a lot like Rochelle. They both had this beautiful olive skin and big brown eyes. And so Rochelle would intentionally carry Kylie just for the reactions.
Yeah.
And
don't judge a book by its cover. I mean, people were looking down on her for being a teen mom. They had no clue.
Comments, and we're laughing to ourselves because we're thinking, you have no idea what's happening here.
All right, a fond memory we have was camping.
Yes.
Are there any tent campers out there? All right, tent campers. All right, tell me, you have to see if you would enjoy this. We've got 4 kids, 2 dogs, and us 2, all in one tent. And it's pouring down rain.
It's pouring rain.
Yeah.
It didn't rain the whole time. There were some breaks. So it was an exercise in patience and perseverance. I'm a hardcore tent camper. Don't park your trailer next to me.
Yeah. But it was fun.
Yeah.
We got great pictures from that time.
It was really fun. It was a great trip, a great time for us to bond and for us to figure out what was happening. I had an interesting question. I'm going to throw this at you.
Okay.
This is live.
This is unscripted.
Yes. How did this affect our marriage during this time? I'm interested to see what you'll say. It's a trick.
Man, this is weird. I just finished a marriage series.
It's hard to remember, right?
You know what? Some of it is a blur. We had crazy amount of stress that we didn't know that we would experience, but it galvanized us. We were teammates, and we had to be teammates. And one of the things that we learned is just to freak out in private. And we would our bedroom became a sanctuary. And it's probably something that it should have been before then, but our bedroom became a sanctuary, and this was our place to decompress, and we were in the trenches together. We were teammates, and there are few things that will galvanize a man and woman together like sharing a mission. And I think that's how it affected us.
You answered it right. I'll give you a high five.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Cool, unscripted moment there. Yeah. So where were we?
I don't remember.
All right.
Kylie.
We stumbled on to something that we didn't even know about.
Yeah.
So at least, I don't know if this is true here, but at least where we were, if you fostered a baby, it was a fast track to be able to adopt that baby. And so there was this really ugly tension and animosity and fear between moms whose kids went into foster care and foster parents. They saw us as the enemy, really as baby thieves, which isn't the case, but you can understand the fear of a mom who's lost all control. And so tell us a little bit about that and how you build a relationship with this mom.
Right. So at this point in our ministry life, we were leading a college group of people, these young adults, and Kylie's mom and dad fit right into this same age group. And it didn't take long for me to understand that Kylie's mom did not like me. And she, every time I'd take her to see her mom, she'd come back in a different outfit just because she resented the clothes that I even brought her in. But I began to understand that this girl didn't have a group of people. She didn't have a community of people to help her navigate life, especially life after treatment. And so I made it my mission to befriend her and to gain her trust so that I would be able to still have contact with Kylie even after she was reunited.
I want to interrupt you real fast because this is when I think God really began to do something to change our perspective. And it went from simply caring for this precious little baby, but trying to care for and support mom and dad. And really, you led the charge in that. And I learned a lot from you in that. So how did we build a relationship with mom and dad? And what did that look like?
Yeah. So, I would drive Kylie to see her parents 3 times a week. Her parents were in treatment centers in 2 different counties, and it was probably 900 miles a month of me driving to take her to different appointments to see her parents. But once they had, finished their treatment program, we were able to have them over for dinner, which was, we learned some things at that dinner.
So let me just, remember when I said before, don't judge a book by its cover. It's really easy to judge. Don't judge. And so it's so easy to judge Kylie's dad as, well, he's a drug dealer and to write him off. But what we learned is he grew up in a family that sold drugs. And his mom and dad, whichever kid sold the most drugs that month, their picture would go up under the title Employee of the Month. And so this guy, he had a Mount Everest worth of challenges to overcome. And they needed people to see past those issues and to really see them. And we had no idea about that. And kind of by God's grace, he just kind of pushed us into that.
Yeah.
And it just switched into kind of a redemption story.
It did. We began to build a relationship with them, and with the help of some friends of ours, we were able to provide Christmas for them. So they were actually able to take Kylie home Christmas Eve and spend the night with her before she came back to us.
I think this is somewhat miraculous. After the mom got Kylie back, got custody back. She's pregnant also. She has a baby. What happens next? This is amazing.
Yeah, so Liz's mom, or Liz, Kylie's mom, she decided to go back to school. So she's pregnant, freshly out of treatment, and she's looking forward to getting Kylie back. So she has the baby while she's still in school, and she asks me to help watch the baby too. So even after Kylie had been reunited with her mom, I was able to watch her and her new baby sister, who was only 2 days old the first day that I watched her. And then we were even invited to Kylie's first birthday party, and we would get to see her from time and time again.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
It was good.
Pretty amazing.
It was.
So let's get back to...
It was hard, though. Can I just say that? Like, this sounds really good, but having 4 kids with 4 totally different needs at different stages, like, if you're a mom, you know that crazy feeling? That's how it was for, 6 months of crazy.
So let's get back to Rochelle. This is the bigger story.
Yes.
The longer story. And let's talk about some of the hard stuff there. And there were times that it was hard. There were times that maybe the best way to describe it, that they were dark times.
Yeah, there were a lot of dark times with Rochelle. She really struggled at school. She had some learning disabilities, and so we made the decision to actually take her out of school. So I was homeschooling her for her senior year of high school.
Which had been your dream in life, to homeschool.
COVID has been hard. Yeah, so Shell was home a lot with me, but she had the full range of mood swings. From one day would be great, and I could tell she was trying really hard, and the next day would be hard and dark and scary because she would just want to go in her room and turn off the lights and not talk to anybody. She would completely shut down.
And again, this is where we were naive. We did not understand what it would take to heal and how much healing was out in front of her and really in front of us, and what it meant to be a part of that. And so there were times that I would say things like this to her: there's nothing you could do to cause us to love you more. There's nothing you could do to cause us to love you less. And the intent was to give her comfort. Instead, she took it as a challenge.
Challenge accepted.
And she wasn't a bad kid, and she wasn't trying to do bad things, but what we did not understand is the self-preservation that was going on. Her whole life, all she had known was abuse and rejection, and so she was convinced that one day we're eventually going to reject her. So she had to protect herself from the rejection that would eventually come from us, that she was convinced would come, and the way to do that was to sabotage all the good things.
Yeah.
And it took a lot to get through that.
It was hard to parent through that season. I mean, up to this point, our experience in parenting was the sum total of these two, and look at this.
He's a nut.
He had done nothing wrong up until this point.
He did poop in the front yard one time.
He did poop in the front yard. That's a different story. So knowing what the right decision was in parenting Rochelle was really difficult because I had no experience and no community to draw from.
And I just want to say this. Let me tell you the same thing I've heard from foster parents and adoptive parents over and over and over again. The theme that I hear is, I'm not good enough. I didn't do good enough. And what you need to know is that's not true. You give your best, and you give the love that you have, and you trust God with the outcome. It's not about being good enough. It's just about giving what you have and loving the best you know how and trusting God with the situation.
Yeah.
And we went through some really, really hard times. We went through some scary times.
There were times we would go for walks, I remember, because she would be in such a dark place, and we needed to get out of the house because the tension in the house, you could feel it. And we would go for walks, and we knew that it was a real possibility that when we got back, she would not be alive.
And we just had to face that.
We had to just face it and know that we have done the very best we can, and she needed some space. I'm grateful that was never the case.
I'm convinced that what makes these stories good stories are not the outcomes. It's the love that we give. That's what makes it a good story. It's not the outcome. It's the love that you share. It's the love that you give. Now, we are very fortunate that this story has a good ending. I think a kind of a miraculous ending. We moved to Utah. She's a young adult now. She wanted to stay in California. We went through kind of a 2-year silent period.
Yeah,
what was that like?
Years. We really didn't speak much. I think she was feeling really hurt and abandoned. We were feeling kind of hurt and used, I think. And, so it was a couple years where the only thing I could do was to regularly send her a text message or a Facebook message that said, hey, I'm thinking about you and I love you. And most often that was not even responded to, but I was consistent in trying to reach out to her at least. And, during that time, which we didn't know till later, Rochelle really took control over her own life. She decided she was no longer a victim and got therapy and really started to work on her relationship with God and really came to a point of healing. And then one day she reached out to us. And it was right before her wedding. Can we have the next picture?
Yeah.
There you go. So this was her wedding day, which is this... This whole thing is amazing because not only did she graduate high school, but she got married and then she had babies in that order, which is unheard of for a lot of foster kids. So we're awfully proud.
This is a pretty great day. I got to dance with her at her wedding. This represents a real milestone, or a significant moment. And we're grateful. We're proud of her.
Yeah.
We're incredibly proud of her, and we're incredibly grateful for her. And this is her husband, Gary. And unfortunately, I don't have pictures of our grandsons who just got mohawks. I'll try to work those.
We have 2 grandsons.
Yeah.
I'm Mimi.
I'm Captain. Yeah.
And Rochelle and Gary are phenomenal parents.
Great
far
parents.
Better than we could have ever hoped.
So I asked Rochelle, would you be willing to share part of your story? She knows that we're doing this today, and I asked her, what would you like to say to all of you all to think about why you might want to take your step forward in providing care for a kid in need? And I don't have the emotional strength to read it, so I'm going to ask you to read it. And this is from Rochelle to all of you.
When I was 2, my biological mom left me and my 3 siblings in an apartment for 2 weeks. CPS was involved when a neighbor called. I was put in foster care where I stayed for 16 years. When I met the Hendersons, I was a teenager who'd seen the worst of humanity with a history of abuse that lasted many years. The only home I had known was ruled with fear, and I had never experienced what love was. I walked into their home not knowing who I was, feeling gross, hopeless, and a burden to anyone around. The Hendersons were not perfect. Just so you know, I pushed back on that point. They did not instantly wash away years of hardship. But I didn't need perfect. I needed someone to step up when I had no one. I needed someone who wanted me alive the next day. I needed someone to walk through the hard times with me. I didn't realize how much work that healing would be or how much there would be to heal from. I was not an easy teenager. Mistakes were made, and some days seemed impossible. But I'm grateful someone stepped up. That choice the Hendersons made changed the course of my life, and it's people like that who can help kids all over the United States.
The number of these kites that you see, they represent kids in our community who need care. It represents just a tiny fraction, just 1% of the kids in our state who need care. And really, just by choosing to look at it through the filter of foster care, we're only looking at a tiny fraction, just a small marginal glimpse of the number of kids in our spheres of influence who need care, who need support, who need love, who need people to look after them. And so I'm asking for us to land here today. There are countless ways to show care and 0 reasons not to. And so I'm going to ask you to respond in one of 3 ways today. If you would pull out your phone and go to autumnridge.church, the first thing that you're going to see is a tile that talks about foster care, and it says, I want to make a difference. Click on that. And keep scrolling through. There's tons of information there for you because we want to give you all the information you need if you're thinking about moving forward. And this would be a good and wise step for some of us. And in that, you're going to see towards the top of that page something called Care Portal. That is a way you wouldn't be a foster parent, but you could join a team to serve, regularly help out people who are foster families, or to engage and help support families to help them avoid the need for foster care altogether. That would be good and wise for many of us. Another thing that you're going to see is Children's Heart Project, where there are families, they don't need to be permanently adopted, but temporarily adopted as they're coming here next month from Bolivia to get much needed surgery. I found out good news this morning. All the host home requirements have been fulfilled. We've got all the host homes we need. But what they're saying is that they could use help with meal support. Would you be willing to stop by and talk about that? That would be good and wise for some of us. And then also, as you go out into the lobby, you're going to find a booth set up by New Life Family Services. And they're there to help you get started with thinking about adoption if that's something that you would be interested in. And that would be good and wise for some of us. But the reason we as Jesus followers take this so seriously is because he looked at us in our mess and our moral brokenness and our sin, and he said, I'll pay for that. I'll fix that if you will trust in me. And because if we trust in Christ, we are fully forgiven and fully accepted and fully delighted in by him, and we are adopted into his family. And when we know, those of us who are followers of Jesus, when we know what it means to be loved that way, it is our joy and it's our privilege to love others that way. So could we land here today? There are countless ways to show care. 0 reasons not to. Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, your grace is beyond description. I don't even know how to talk about, much less think about just what it means that you would willingly take on the price of all of our hurts, that you would love us, that you would rescue us, that you would pull us out of our moral confusion and sin, that you would give us your Spirit to work in us to help us to grow to be more like Christ. And God, I pray today that we would take our next step to be more like him as we seek to love kids and the way that we have been loved by you. And it's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.